If you want to get rich, you have to own property. And so Bitcoin is property that the middle class and working class people can own everywhere in the world. And otherwise, they're going to be destitute. So Bitcoin is a solution to the individual and the corporation. Bitcoin is not going to eliminate the euro, the yen, the won, and the dollar. They will all continue. And I think that I think that it's idealistic to think that somehow all of the world's problems get solved in the next decade with Bitcoin. That's not true. But what is true is that if you're about to become poor and starve to death in the middle of a country where the currency is collapsing, it'll solve your problem. I agree that this is a probabilistic assessment when you live in the US and you have to choose between gold, S&P indexes, real estate in Florida, and other derivatives and other contracts and Apple stock. It's a probabilistic thing, and you got to have a portfolio of you. But the interest rate in Argentina right now is 49% overnight. And the official inflation rate is probably 60, and the unofficial inflation rate is 80. And so you have a different view toward probabilistic risk when the ship is sinking and you're about to lose everything in 36 months. So I would say with regard to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is an interesting, nice to have, and an intellectual discussion for people in Western Europe and the US and the developed world with a strong currency losing 7% of its value a year. But Bitcoin represents a life raft to the billions of people in Sri Lanka and Lebanon and Turkey and Argentina and Venezuela, not to mention the ones in Cuba and North Korea that have zero property rights. And of course, half of the world or more has capital controls, right? If you look at that blue dollar rate, what you'll find is that the official rate is 170, the unofficial rate is 317. It means the government and the bank steal half of your money every time you change it. Yeah. Okay. And so this is offensive to the Bitcoiners. And our view is it's offensive that they steal half of your money every 36 months. And it's offensive they steal half your money every time you change it. And it's also offensive that MasterCard and Visa take 2.5% of your money every time you move a transaction from left to right, which means that if you do 40 transactions a year, you've lost all your money. So the credit system and the banking system is onerous and expensive and inefficient. And the monetary system and the fiat currencies are confiscatory, and they're brutally unfair. And if you want to have money, you can't depend upon the currencies. So if you're lucky and you're wealthy, maybe you can buy buildings and start Standard Oil, and you can invest in big tech. But what about the taxi cab driver in Nigeria? What about the 4 billion people that are, that are unbanked? And what about the other 3 billion that don't happen to be in the top billion elite? What about them? My view on this entire issue is Bitcoin is about 0.1% of the liquid financial assets circulating around the world right now, like $300 to $400 billion out of a $400 trillion number. If it got 10 times bigger, it would be 1%. If it got 100 times bigger, it would be 10%. So in our lifetime, in the next 10 to 30 years, I don't think the entire world is going to be revolving around Bitcoin. I think that what you'll see is Bitcoin is a reserve asset that can replace gold and can replace land and can replace portfolios of stocks as a long-term treasury asset. I think that everybody in the world, as long as there are nation states, you have to respect the Argentine government, and you're going to have to pay your taxes in the peso, even though you don't like it. And then you got to respect the US government. The USD is going to be the world reserve currency. In China, the CNY is going to be strong. So in Europe, as long as the European Union lasts, the euro is going to be a player. So the right way, I think, for us to think about it is what portion of your monetary assets are sitting in dollars, what portion is sitting in pesos or bolivar, and what portion is sitting in a liquid treasury reserve asset like Bitcoin. And then what portion of your wealth would you have invested in buildings and stocks and collectibles and derivatives and bonds? And the answer to that is different for everybody, depending upon how much money they have and where they reside in their citizenship. And also whether you're a corporate entity or you're a family or an individual is different. I think that you get yourself in trouble if you start imagining just a world where Bitcoin is the only asset, and debt goes away and currencies go away. Now you just get into some very interesting hypothetical situations, but I don't really care to promote them or debate them because I just don't think it's constructive for the next 30 years. One more point, as long as there are nation states, there will be currencies. And when the US is no longer relevant, there will be no US dollar. As long as there are corporations like Apple and Google, there will be securities. And so I don't promote securities and currencies because my view is the safest ethical ground to stand on is to promote a commodity without an issuer, right? I don't promote them. But I understand there's 10,000 securities you might invest in, and you can make mistakes or you can make a lot of money on them. And I don't dismiss the value of Google stock. And I understand that you really need the Russian ruble if you live in Russia, and you really need the bolivar if you live in Venezuela, even though the bolivar loses 98% of its value in 2 years. You still need it, right? So I think that you got to look at a world of multiple assets, and then you got to have a portfolio theory as to how you balance the assets. And if I was giving advice to an Argentine, I would say hold a month to 2 months worth of pesos, and then hold a year to 2 years worth of dollars, and hold a few decades worth of Bitcoin if you had to hold only liquid assets.